am Kiranmayi, Assistant Professor, Institute of Public Enterprise. Today we are going to talk about the turnaround management in public sector enterprises in India. Turnaround is a strategic decision leading to the maximization of company's growth by enhancing its production, marketing, operations, reduced competition, free flow of capital through globalization process. Turnaround means one through which the employee may be met with the challenges and problems which can be confronting the business. Before we talk about turnaround, let us see what public enterprises are facing in the current scenario. Public enterprises are inseparable part of the process of dynamics of the economic development in the country. Their contribution to surge in the economic growth has been phenomenal. There is a hard way through which the economic activity in the country wherein the public enterprises have not marked their presence. They continue to dominate the socio-economic scenario of the country irrespective of the political ideology ruling the country. They stood taller than that and they debated the old economies with that of the new economies and fought for the new industries to come in place. Sickness has been a universal phenomenon. Sickness in these enterprises is a symptom of ailment and not an ailment in itself. During 1970, there were around 22,500 sick units in India, which grew more than 10 times over a period. Many financial institutions' resources were locked in these sick enterprises, both large and medium and also small enterprises. The incidences of sickness quite understandably has been the cause of considerable concern for the governments, financial institutions, banks and other institutions. Sickness in these CPSEs has been a continuing concern of the governments. The reason for sickness varies from enterprise to enterprise. In some cases, the sickness is caused because of exceptional factors, historical factors, economical situations, market conditions, etc. Due to these reasons, some central public sector enterprises have been incurring losses continuously for the last several years. The problem of sickness in these CPSEs is addressed by the respective administrative ministries, departments, parent companies and government initiatives. The government, by evolving appropriate need-based strategies concerning to these enterprises, have been coming from time to time. The accumulated losses in these enterprises have surpassed their net worth. There has been significant improvement in the overall conditions of these enterprises in the recent time, whereas those enterprises have already suffered sickness in the past. The two main reasons which we can quote in terms of sickness are financial and operational. The financial reasons include high leverage for the industry, project cost overruns, fund diversification from one project to another project, funding of long-term assets with that of the short-term funds, and bundling the debt services obligations of these enterprises. Let us now talk about the operational reasons. New projects coinciding with the downturn with the industry, operating profits insufficient to serve the debt, and very high level of receivables and inadequate debt recoveries. With these two important terms of the sickness, these enterprises started surviving and struggling. There are some other reasons pertaining to sickness which are included as marketing reasons. The overestimation of market behavior, the consumer preferences, the product demands, the strategic formulation at the top level are some of the important reasons for this sickness. It is interesting to mention that as a part of the restructuring exercise and to fight for the successful existence in the global market, the merger of Air India and Indian Airlines, the merger of Rashtriya Ispat Nigam Limited with the Steel Authority of India and the oil group companies were also considered. The Indian Railways is an important and a successful example of turnaround strategies in our country. Many public enterprises are going for diverse type of restructuring measures such as manpower restructuring, operational restructuring, strategic restructuring, financial restructuring, organizational restructuring, and also setting up joint ventures with other institutions. Let us now see the legal framework which is being covering these enterprises to overcome the sickness. The Reserve Bank of India was constantly monitoring the industrial sick units in our country. During the year 1975, the Reserve Bank of India has appointed a study group under the chairmanship of Mr. Tandon. The Government of India has constituted an expert committee during 1981 under the chairmanship of Shri Tiwari. These two committees started examining the industrial sickness in our country. The industrial sickness and the scenarios have been studied and the committees have recommended. Based on these recommendations of the committees, the Government of India enacted special legislations known as Sick Industrial Companies Act 1985, which is also called as SICA. The SICA 1985 was amended in the year 1991, bringing some industrial changes and also incorporating the problems which have been related to public sector undertakings. SICA defines a sick enterprise as, quote unquote, if at the end of any financial year, if the accumulated loss of an enterprise is equal to or exceeding its entire net worth, the enterprise is being termed as sick. Let us talk about the main objectives of this SICA Act. The main objective of SICA is to determine sickness and expedite the revival of potentially viable units or closure of the unviable units. It was expected that by revival, idle investments in the sick units will become productive, and by closure, the locked up investment in unviable units would get released for productive use elsewhere. The companies are required to be referred to the Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction for the formulation of rehabilitation and revival plans. As per the Department of Public Enterprise Resolution dated 6th December 2004, a company will be considered as sick if the accumulated loss in any financial year is equal to 50% or more of its average net turnover during the past 4 years, and such companies which is a sick company within the meaning of SICA Act is also being considered. According to the Companies Act, a company is stated to be sick which has an accumulated loss in any financial year which is more than 50%. An enterprise remains healthy if it operates in reasonably favorable environment and has a fairly efficient management. When these conditions are not satisfied, the enterprise is likely to become sick. Sickness is caused by unfavorable external environment as well as managerial deficiencies in the organizations. The main objectives of SICA is to determine sickness and expedite the revival of potentially viable enterprises or closure of the unviable enterprises. The Committee of Industrial Sickness and the Committee on Corporate Restructuring, headed by Sri Omkar Goswami during 1993, suggested that rehabilitation is a lead and motive of SICA to winding up the constant refrain, the better. The committee has recommended the Committee on Industrial Sickness and Corporate Restructuring, headed by Sri Omkar Goswami during 1993, suggested that rehabilitation is the leitmotif of SICA. Winding up of the constraint remains better. The committee has recommended the fact that the BIFR recommended winding up of only 242 companies out of 1010 companies. These are the registered companies with the SICA. SICA applies to companies both in public as well as under private sector agencies. Now let us understand the various institutions that were set up under the SICA Act. The Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction, it is also called as BIFR. The BIFR was set up in January 1987 and functional with effect from 5th May 1987. The Appellate Authority of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction was constituted in the year 1987. The government companies were brought under the purview of SICA only during 1991. When the existence changes, the Inter Alia Act was also being placed. The main objectives of SICA includes the SICA had been enacted in the public interest to deal with the problems of industrial sickness with regard to the crucial sectors where public money is being locked. It contains special provisions for timely detection of sick and potentially sick industrial companies and speedy determination and enforcement of the preventive measures. The measures are to be taken by the body of an expert. The measures mainly include legal, financial restructuring, managerial restructuring, and policy issues at the strategic level. Let us now discuss what are the various classifications of sickness. Sickness is classified into 5 broad types. There are genetically sick, structural sickness, operational sickness, policy-linked sickness, and environmental sickness. Let us discuss each of these. Genetically sick enterprises. Some enterprises are genetically sick. There are 2 important types of genetically sick enterprises. One is called a cluster enterprises and the other are individuals. Example of a cluster enterprise includes National Textile Corporation. It has got a cluster of units with it, and when the parent company became sick, the enterprises also started falling sick. National Textile Corporation is a classic example of cluster sickness, whereas Indian Iron and Steel Company is an example for individual sickness. Structural sickness. Some enterprises with some basic deficiencies in their conceptual visualization come in this category. The structural sickness could be owing to an uneconomic location, obsolete technology, overcapitalization, etc. Example, Bharat Bhari Yantra Nigam Limited is an example under this category. Operational sickness. Enterprises where management failure occurs, these kind of sickness is being caused. There could be a classic example of HMT Limited, Praga Tools, etc. could be quoted. Policy-linked sickness is a form where the sickness is owing to the exposure of the change in the fairly policy-related issues at the company's strategic level. Bridge and Roof Corporation is an example, along with IDPL, FACT. The environmental sickness occurs with the external factors which have been impacting the enterprises. This could be the lack of material supply, the lack of support from the external sources is being caused through this environmental sickness. Example, NEPA, ECIL. If you see the matrix below, which talks about the types of sickness along with the causes and what are the responsive strategies that have to be initiated, we can easily make out that these sicknesses could be overcome. For example, In case of genetically sick enterprises, the restructuring with heavy and critical inputs could be a strategy measure. Whereas in the case of structural sickness, we can talk about restructuring with management intervention at the strategic and the middle level could be a greater asset. Under the operational sickness, need must be maintained to see that there is a lot of management interventions in decision making and bringing everyone together to overcome the operational sickness in the companies. If the policy linked sickness is being there, the policies have to be changed according to the situations and certain decisions have to be taken by the enterprise. In the case of environmental sickness, management has to change the interventions in terms of the various issues pertaining to the environmental sickness aspects. Let us now talk about the Board for Reconstruction of Public Enterprises. After the BIFR has been formed, the Department of Public Enterprise and the Ministry of Finance has created a special board which is called as Board for Reconstruction of Public Sector Enterprises. The Ministry of Finance and the Minister during the budget speech in the year 2004 and 5 announced that the government would constitute a special board to address the problems relating to the public sector enterprise and to strengthen them, to modernize and to implement the revival and restructuring of these enterprises. The government constituted a board for reconstruction of public enterprises with a wide DPE resolution dated 6th December 2004 as a part-time advisory board to address the tasks and to strengthening the modernization of CPSE system. The board comprises of a part-time chairman, 3 non-official members and 3 official members. In addition, the chairman of the Standing Conference of Public Enterprises, SCO, the chairman, Public Enterprise Selection Board, PESB, and the chairman, ONGC, that is Oil and Natural Gas Limited, are the permanent invitees. The secretaries of the ministries and the departments, those involved with the public enterprises whose proposals are considered by the board, are also invited to attend the board meeting as special invitees when the proposals are being moved in the board for discussion. The board is being serviced by the Department of Public Enterprise under the Ministry of Heavy Industries and Public Enterprises. The board, being a part-time advisory body, normally meets twice a month, and the board held 46 meetings so far and considered 51 cases for the recommendations under the BRPSC. The remaining cases were also being considered by the respective administrative ministries. The board has taken the revival packages for 41 CPSEs and recommended to have 1,70,000 crore involving a cash support and 3,200 crores as non-cash support. The board held 46 meetings considering 51 cases and made recommendations in respect of 43 cases. The remaining cases are retained to be considered by the respective administrative ministries for further examination. The aggregate cost of the revival to the government in respect of these 41 enterprises was around 1,07,000 crores, involving a cash of 3,249 crores and a non-cash of 1,03,000 crore. The cash assistance normally is in the form of equity, loan and grant, whereas the non-cash assistance is in the form of waivers of interest-free loans, guarantees, fees, concessions, lands, etc. The functions of BRPSC includes to advise the government on ways and means for strengthening the public sector enterprises in general and making them more autonomous in particular, to consider restructuring financially, organizationally, business of the CPSEs and suggest ways and means to fund the schemes. This also includes to examine the proposals of the administrative ministries and the ministers for revival and restructuring of the SIC units at the central to undertake the turnaround process. To advise the government on the disinvestment, closure or the sale in full or part in respect of the chronically sick or loss-making enterprises which cannot be reviewed is also been one of the major objectives. In respect of such unviable companies, the board would also advise the government about the various sources of funds, including the sale of surplus of assets of these enterprises for the payment of other kind of dues which are being pending, which includes compensation to the workers. The board also tries to monitor the exceptionally sick companies at all levels. The board acts as advisor to the government on such matters which are not being supported by the public enterprises. There is a linkage between the BIFR and BRPSC. While the Board for Industrial and Financial Restructuring is a statutory body created by the Act of Parliament, the Sikh Industries Companies Act 1985, under the Ministry of Finance, the BRPSC is an advisory body created to resolve the government to address the task of strengthening, modernizing, reviving and restructuring these public sector enterprises. The jurisdictions of the BIFR is large as it covers both public and private sector enterprises, but in the case of BRPSC, it is restrictive to only the central public sector enterprises or some enterprises belonging to the state level. The board advices of the BRPSC also been sought by the government from case to case, which are being referred to the BIFR for the firming up of government's view on the revival packages to these enterprises. An exceptional Sikh CPSC may be referred to the BRPSC as it advises help them to take a better decision over the BIFR. The administrative ministries are also associated as one of the agencies in the efforts of the BIFR during the last 15 years and have undertaken around 75 enterprises into its ambit. Now, the number of enterprises which have been referred to BIFR started coming down. From the particular table which has been shown here, we can see that the numbers have constantly come down in the case of the BIFR. The following table depicts the details of both the central and the state enterprises cases wherein the net worth and the accumulated losses of these enterprises have been very negative and have been referred to the BRPSC. There has been a plethora of cases of restructuring among the central public enterprises. The case of central public enterprises, namely the Electronic Corporation of India, shows how restructuring have changed the face of the public enterprise and made it more vibrant and infused the element of competitiveness to enable it to become the leader in the domestic as well as in the global market. Let us now see this case. The Electronic Corporation of India, a fully owned central public enterprise under the Department of Atomic Energy, was set up to create facilities for manufacturing of specialized nuclear components. However, over a period of time, the ECIL extended its activities to the field of computers and information technology and also into the defense instrumentation and scanning equipment, televisions, etc. This resulted in investing heavily in the new divisions, creating new facilities, recruiting manpower and reinforcement of services at various regions. The company incurred a huge loss of 100 crores while setting up of the mainframe computers. The company fortune faced rough weather after 2 decades of its setting up due to severe competition of low technology and consumer items. Outsourcing became much cheaper, prohibiting the input cost volume. And The huge remuneration price which have been paid to its employees was also another reason. As a result of this, the net worth of the company eroded by 50% and company was referred to BIFR. A flow of finance faced obstruction at the hands of the banks and also with the creditors. A number of strategic measures were initiated, including reconstitution of pricing strategies, converting production centers into strategic business units, and their full empowerment and intensive training to the SBU leaders and senior executives in accounting and financial disciplines. The company appointed ICICI to carry a diagnosis study closed with the TV division and sought the government approval for waiving off the total loss of the mainframe computer unit, the capital reorganization and assistance in terms of the VRS scheme. The company initiated financial restructuring which led to the conversion of debt to equity, writing off the waivers and rescheduling the debt and moratorium periods for the banks, closures of uneconomic activities and introduced the VRS scheme and introducing new business lines and products and systems. The Government of India was very supportive in these exercises. It granted the waive off of all the losses concerning to the mainframe divisions, permitted the public enterprise to the conversion of loan into equity and extended grants to have the VRS scheme implemented. The outcomes were expected. The company had very healthy turnaround and the company reduced its staffing from 1200 employees and also its accumulated loss was reduced. It obtained the requisite support from the suppliers and bankers. The loss-making position in 98-99 and 99-2000 went at 360 degree by paying off the dividends, a huge income tax, positive net worth and becoming debt-free company with a cash surplus in 2000-2001. The company had been receiving the Best MOU Excellence Award consequently for many years. CRISIL also has awarded the highest credit rating for the company. The company has become favorable account holder for various bankers. Thus, this is a classic case of turnaround among the central public enterprises in the country. There are many companies which have undertaken various initiatives towards the restructuring phase and turned around the various activities. The turnaround strategies has been fueled by variety of forces. It has led to the drastic improvement in corporate performance. The strategic movers of the turnaround management are touched in the context of complete SIC organization in general and transport undertakings in particular. The key insights are drawn from the functional as well as operational points of view to explain the complete process and develop insightful significant in this particular context. That's how this scenario of turnaround is a very important scenario when we come to know and talk about the performance of public sector enterprises in India. Thank you.